Friends and family, welcome to Foundations of the Future. The whole endeavor here is to understand how do we create the best future for humanity? How do we create the best future for the environment? Those are really the questions. There are lots of problems, there are lots of potential solutions. Let's put everything out on the table and let's try to understand really, again, what those biggest problems are and how we can solve them. I think it's super important to the longevity of humanity that we do this. And we are very intellectually honest about it as well. So every week I'm going to release a newsletter with three major categories. The first is vertical farming, the second is human and environmental health, and the third is future tech. So I analyze recent developments in each of those areas and the biggest issues in each of those areas, and I hope that this is informative, and I hope that it is also fun. So let's start. Here in week 2, we're going to do a vertical farming spotlight. Selfish as I am, the first vertical farming spotlight is going to be on OnePointOne. OnePointOne is the company that I started with my brother back in 2017. I'll go through a little bit about OnePointOne here in this video, and then we'll move on to human and environmental health and also future tech, and a topic in future tech that I'm going to harp on about for centuries. So when John and I, we finished our master's degrees, mine in robotics, his in electrical engineering, we got together and we said, look, we're going to be dead really bloody soon. Let's figure out what are the greatest problems on Earth and which of those problems can we solve the fastest or have the greatest impact on in the shortest period of time. So when we went through the analysis, we'll get through some of this information here in section number 2, but when we went through the analysis, it all came down to agriculture, it all came down to food, it all came down to diet. And so we looked at traditional farming, we looked at greenhouse agriculture. With our backgrounds, we didn't see how we were going to make a 0 to 1 improvement to each of those industries. But when we found vertical farming, we knew we could make a difference. So back in 2017, we started this business. Essentially what we are now, we've raised $70 million from a number of names that you would be familiar with. We're a stealthy business. We don't have much information out in the market. But we are working very, very hard to develop a vertical farming technology that can scale worldwide. So vertical farming is the process of producing plants inside of warehouses. You use robots and AI and plant science techniques, LED lights, HVAC, to produce plants at their highest quality with zero seasonality. So as I said, we've been at this for about 6 years. We're located here in Scottsdale, Arizona. Right now, we're just starting to generate a significant amount of revenue with new farm customers. But the whole goal with OnePointOne is to develop a technology that is internationally scalable, that can grow plants to their highest quality. Plants are fundamental to the health of humans. Even if you are a carnivore, what do you think those animals eat that you are eating? It all comes down to plants. It all comes down to agriculture. So at OnePointOne, we've developed a system where you can grow a wide variety of plants year-round with zero seasonality. But the purpose of this podcast is not to plug OnePointOne too much. If you're interested, please go to our website. The main point of this first section is to introduce you to our business and introduce you to a little bit about the philosophy behind OnePointOne as well. Moving on to section 2, and don't worry, there'll be a lot more about OnePointOne, you can only imagine. All right, this is big. So, what is the number one destroyer of nature? So we all take our environment very seriously. Particularly, I would say over the last 30 years, society has become conscious about our human impact on the environment. It's important to us. So when we have a discussion about what is destroying the environment at the greatest rate and which of those problems can we solve the fastest or the most, it's a really important conversation, and it's really important to have all of that information out on the table. We don't just want to prioritize one thing over 8 other things because it is emotionally engaging. Let's have a look at these problems. Let's see which affect humanity, which affect the environment, to the greatest extent, and how we can solve these issues. So, what is the number one destroyer of nature? It's agriculture. Take the earth. 30% of the earth is land, around about. You take that 30% of the area that is land, only about 70% of that is habitable. Some of it is ice, some of it is rocky, only about 70% of that is habitable. So now we're talking about 20% of the Earth's surface is habitable. We've taken half of that land. We've flattened it. Often cases we've sterilized it, all for the production of food. Whether it's the production of food directly for humans, plants, crops, or it's the production indirectly of food for animals that we eventually eat, we've taken 50% of our habitable land on planet Earth and we have wiped it clear. I suppose I'll go out on a limb a little bit. I don't know of another industry, or I don't know of another mechanism that has flat out destroyed more of nature. Obviously, ocean acidification is a problem. Plastic in the ocean is a problem. Pollution is a problem. All of these things are problems, and we should have experts in each domain figuring out how to solve those problems. But this second, 50% of habitable land has been wiped. The trees that used to live there, the animals that used to live there, the insects that used to live there, the microbiome of the soil, all of that has been disrupted. If we want to focus on how we restore nature back to its original state prior to human intervention, to the greatest extent, it is to figure out a way to restore that farmland back to its natural state. And so that refers back to part number one, which is about vertical farming. This is part of the reason why John and I got into vertical farming in the first place, is because 50% of habitable land is attributable to agriculture. We need to become unbelievably more efficient with how we are growing our plants. And by the way, we have. Don't get me wrong. Farmers are incredible. Plant scientists are incredible. We have, for example, I think 10x'd the yield per acre for corn in the last 80 years or so. Incredible, incredible. Kudos. My hat goes off to you all. But looking back, being grateful for what they've done, let's also look forward. How do we get better? And that's where vertical farming comes in to a significant extent. So back to my point, we have environmental health on the left, we have human health on the right. What's the number one problem that the environment faces due to humans? It's agriculture, in my opinion. It's not climate change. Climate change is a big issue, but I don't think it's number one. Then we look at number two, human health. Let's go have a look at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Lancet. Let's see what they say. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Lancet came together to try and understand what is the leading killer on Earth, or slightly more scientifically, what is the number one risk factor determinant for mortality? What are the underlying conditions that cause cancer, that cause heart disease, and all of these other forms of mortality? When we look at that question, what kills humans more than anything else? It's poor diet, what you eat. So you've got agriculture producing what we eat, having the greatest negative impact on nature, and then we have the greatest negative impact on human health is poor diet. An analysis of that study by the Lancet and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation said across most countries, the leading cause of death is poor diet. What on earth is going on? That is the leading cause of death. How often do we hear about that? How often do we hear about the statistics about the state of health in the United States? Woeful. Absolutely woeful. 70% of the United States population overweight, 40-something% obese. Nothing against these people individually, of course, nothing at all. But how is this the state of play? It is troubling, very troubling for me. And this also feeds into why we went into vertical farming, because these farms produce highly nutritious products. The problem is not whether or not people get enough calories. 150 million people worldwide, I'll say only, but 150 million people worldwide suffer from malnourishment in that they don't get enough macronutrients. They don't get enough calories in the first place. Most malnutrition, on the order of 3 billion people worldwide of the 8 billion, are malnourished from micronutrient deficiencies. Zinc, manganese, all of these, magnesium, all of these micronutrients that we should be consuming on a regular basis, but we don't. The United States is not unwell because it doesn't have enough food. The West in general is not unwell because we don't have enough food. We're eating too much of the wrong thing. So have a look at those 2 links that I threw in there. I hope they're very, very informative. And I hope it recalibrates how we're thinking about these problems. I hope we read this and we say, okay, well, climate change is a very big issue. We should limit our impact on the environment from the perspective of CO2 into the atmosphere. CO2 into the atmosphere is one very small sliver of environmental destruction. A small sliver. Let's look at the entire width of natural issues. Now we get to my second favorite topic. Future tech. This section is about the technology that is going to most significantly impact humans in the future. Positive and negative, but hopefully mostly positive. I'm not going to be a doomsdayer, don't worry. Well, maybe personally, but not in this podcast. Stop fearing nuclear. Please. Those individuals that are anti-nuclear, I believe, are doing a disservice. When we were uncertain in the 70s and 80s about the safety of nuclear, when we were having those issues, obviously in Ukraine, we had the issue in 3 Mile Island. I understand. It's 2023 now. The link that I have put into this newsletter is just a little bit of information about nuclear in the United States. And I have done a lot of research into this topic. A lot, both on the technical angle, the political angle. I've really looked into this and I'm trying to find the holes. So if you have some holes that I'm unaware of, please send that information through. But all of this push for green energy, nuclear produces more than 50% of the clean energy in the United States today. Clean, yes, clean. More than 50%. Think of the money that has gone into solar and wind. Good grief. If that money went into nuclear, and I'm talking fission, not fusion, I'm talking about nuclear power plants that work, the United States would be in a very, very different place. There are 53 reactors in the United States, active today, powering tens of millions of homes. It produces more energy than wind and solar and hydro combined. Hydro I'll have to check on, but definitely wind and solar. I mean, how many people have died in the United States from nuclear accidents? 0. How many people died from the Fukushima accident? Well, I think a couple thousand as they were fleeing, but 0 from radiation. Ukraine, Chernobyl is maybe a slightly different story. We're aware of 40 or 50 direct deaths from radiation poisoning. Those were the firefighters and the emergency responders that went in there and solved that issue. My goodness, hats off to them. They knew exactly what their destiny was when they walked into those doors. But the rate of death is unbelievably small. Unbelievably small. This fear about nuclear has done so much harm to the United States, in my opinion. This needs to be turned around as soon as possible. The US has lost the understanding of how to build these new reactors. We just commissioned a new one last year for the first time in goodness knows how long. This technology works. This technology is far safer than coal or natural gas. I mean, there are some statistics we'll get into in a few weeks about nuclear being greener than wind and safer than solar. If you're worried about nuclear waste, the entire history of United States nuclear waste could fit on a football field 15 feet high. When I say these things, I don't say them because they're not a problem. I'm just trying to put them into perspective. I'm trying to get a measure of perspective. Can we humans figure out a way to store nuclear waste? Yes. Can we do so that doesn't harm some civilization 30,000 years into the future? I believe so. There are ways that we can handle these problems. So I think we all need to rethink or recalibrate first the element of fear. Let's just go look at the data about what has occurred with nuclear accidents and the number of people that have died from these nuclear accidents, which is tragic but infinitesimally small compared to the other forms of energy production. Nuclear is a miracle of physics. And if humans come together and figure out how to deploy these systems in a very safe manner, you're going to have a completely different world. If you can get electricity anywhere in the United States for 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt hour, that changes everything. And it changes everything in food production as well. Okay, off my soapbox. Even though I'm going to be back on it next week. Don't worry. Not that you're worried. Thank you for tuning in to this first episode of the second newsletter of Foundations of the Future. I had a logo that was an FF, but Faraday Future stole that one, so thanks a lot, Faraday Future. But then I went to Microsoft AI and said, hey, my business, the speaking business that I have is called Disseminate LLC. So I went to Microsoft Designer AI and I said, take a D, take an 8, put them together, make a logo. Not bad, huh? Woo! I'm pretty happy with it. Anyway, everyone, hope you had fun. Hope you learned a little bit. We'll be back next week with some more info. Sending love to all. Stay optimistic. Stay pragmatic. Much love.